Um, Oftentimes in discussions I'm having with people who I've gone to school with and friends of mine, oftentimes over Facebook, where things quickly get lost and no nuance exists there and everything. Oftentimes it feels like really the best thing that I as a cisgendered male can do is to die. And I realize that now, hearing you talk and everything, that this is kind of the result of the pendulum being swung very far to one end, and I was wondering if you thought that are we now at the point where a pendulum is about to swing back into a more kind of moderate, let's all actually do something together and treat each other as equals, all genders, all races kind of thing?
Well, I'm calling for men to take control again of their own lives. So I've said in a recent interview that if there's a women's center at Yale University, which there is for the undergraduates, then there should be a men's center. There should be absolute equality. And the men should be totally free to do whatever they want in their men's center. Okay? They can show dirty movies or whatever they want. Okay? This constantly beating down of men, okay? This demand that men redefine themselves until they suit what feminists want them to be, it's an outrage. Okay? And I'm saying throughout this book and the pieces I've written over the years, that the civilization, with all of its protections and conveniences, is essentially the invention of men. Now, I explain that in my first book, Sexual Personae, by saying that woman's power is so enormous that men had to band together to go off and to create these objective structures. And I still think that my analysis of it is absolutely right. But it's men who are doing all of the hardest and dirtiest work in society. I told in a recent interview of that there's a whole list of things. When there's an ice storm in the Northeast, it's the men who go out at 2 a.m. with the live wires and so on. I rarely see women going out at that hour. I never see women manning the great vats of tar in the heat of the summer that people are mixing to put on the roof. Okay, I never see the women as I did last year, saw an enormous sewage break in a neighboring town, with where men in hazmat suits were up to their knees in wastewater. Okay? Not a single woman wants to volunteer for that kind of work. People are still depending on men and keeping working class men invisible. I've launched an attack, for example, on Sheryl Sandberg, right? As incredibly smugly entitled, talking about leaning in while at the same time concealing from sight all of those servants that she has and the nannies that she has, okay, who are working class people who are supporting her particular very public lifestyle. So I think in general, it's men are erased, the contributions of men are erased, and also the contributions of working class people are erased. And this has to stop. Okay, it has to stop. We need a much more enlightened feminism. I think that most men are in favor of women rising in society and being in charge in society. We're no longer in the antediluvian old days. So I want men, okay, to recover a sense of who they are as men again, okay, and not feel they have to obey any list, okay, checklist being issued by Gloria Steinem and company in Manhattan. Okay. Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
So a lot of what you're saying is very, very offensive and bothersome to me as a cisgendered man living in the year 2017 in this city. And to your point about the ice storms in the Northeast and how women aren't out there fighting them, well, why don't you think about like these institutions that, that like road crews and the like microaggressions and the sexism on these crews of the working class man. I'm a landscaper, and I can tell you that there is a huge degree of like, okay, my question is about, do you believe that sexism is relevant? Because you said that women have to stop blaming men for their unhappiness, and nowhere in there was a discussion of sexism in the workplace, that women are like treated as less smart, as less capable. And it seems to me that your words are sort of reinforcing this notion, especially in terms of the workplace.
Well, I am an equity feminist. That is, I believe in the removal of all advances to women's, all obstacles to women's advance in society in the professional and political realm. So absolutely, I'm very focused on any instance of workplace sexism. What I'm saying in my writing is that we are not simply working individuals, all right? There is a public side of our life and there is a private side of our life. In Sexual Personae, 700-page book, I talked about the psychological, the dream life of mankind. There are all kinds of primitive impulses in us that are very atavistic. Do we want to understand ourselves as human beings or what? Okay? We cannot simply define human beings in terms of what we are in the workplace or in the political realm. I believe that was actually the biggest legacy of the 1960s. 1960s were about turning away from materialistic careerism and embarking on a kind of cosmic quest for meaning in the universe. So I think that my work offers a kind of dual perspective. I'm talking about women's advance in society and what best helps that, and I'm also talking about our need as human beings to expand our imaginations. Even though I'm an atheist, I have a very spiritualistic view of the universe, and that is my particular vibration with Native American culture. That's in fact what I'm doing for the last 9 years, is trying to map, okay, the actual metaphysical, religious perspective of the ancient Native Americans. I believe that my views of things as represented in Sexual Personae are very much in vibe with that.
Hi, thank you for coming. I read Sexual Persona during a time when I was recovering from a incident with sexism, and so workplace sexism definitely is something that affects a lot of women. What can male allies do to help alleviate the common situation of workplace sexism in a way that doesn't overly blame them for the problem?
Well, I'm saying that a real man is honorable. A real man respects women. And that any man who abuses women or treats them in a denigrating fashion is showing weakness, a weakness that in fact comes from some inner sense that he has of woman's overwhelming power. Okay? And to prove that, I had to write a 700-page book. Okay, all right. So I'm calling for a mutual recognition, a mutual respect between the sexes, but I'm also calling for middle-class girls to stop asking for special protections. Again, I want equality of treatment in the workplace, but I think there's too much decrying, okay, of men's behavior, when in fact what too many white upper-middle-class girls are bringing now, okay, to the workplace is a certain manner of speaking, okay, that is removed from the actual harshness of the world. That actually working-class women, whether they come from the farmland or they come from the street, okay, understand the risks and dangers of the world. So some of the most controversial writing that I've done is about the need, okay, for women to be Amazon warriors for themselves. Okay, that is my philosophy is street smart feminism, okay, or Amazonism. That's why I pose with weapons in so many of my pictures. All right, it's up to women themselves to understand the dangers of the world, not expect the world to be an extension of their protected, comfortable middle-class living room. And that's, I think, what's happened. I see women whose voices aren't strong enough. Okay, women have to learn, okay, not to be embarrassed, okay, to be loud, okay, and to confront when it happens. I see too many cases of women who are dismayed by something which they feel is demeaning and who just accept it. All right, and that is not no. The first time it happens, you speak out. You speak out. You stop it. You're in their face, like immediately. You see? okay? And that's what I believe I represent, okay? Which is that every moment of every day, you have a responsibility to protect your own dignity, okay? And it doesn't matter if you're embarrassed or you create an embarrassing situation. You protect yourself. Now, you see, when my generation arrived in college, 1964, the parietal rules were in full, in full power. So that at Harper College, State University of New York at Binghamton, where I went to college, the girls had to sign in at 11 o'clock at night into the dorms. And the guys could run free all night long, okay? And so it's my generation of women who said, right, we want the same treatment as men. We want the equality, okay, that, and freedom that men enjoy. And the colleges said, no, the world is dangerous, okay? We must protect you. We must protect you against rape. And we said, give us the freedom to risk rape. Freedom. Freedom is the value, not protection, okay? So it dismays me to see young women today wanting the parent figures back, okay? Wanting the oversight, wanting to run to committees when something goes wrong on a date. I oppose that, okay? I think it's infantilizing, and women have got to stop doing that, okay? They have to govern their own relationships with men or with anyone else. Okay? And that is the only way women will ever become totally free and totally equal.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
It's very nice to see another Southern Tier native and Binghamton grad.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
I said it's very nice to see another Southern Tier native
Oh, you're
and
Southern Tier.
Binghamton grad.
Oh, okay. Oh, great. Okay.
We have a common upbringing, and our fathers knew each other.
Oh.
And you're very big on extended family, clan, and tribe.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of paradigm would you see for making this relevant in the 21st century?
Well, I'm not sure that we can ever recover that tribal, connectedness any longer. But I do see it still surviving for working class families much more than for upper middle class families. I noticed this, for example, when going to the New Jersey shore just to walk on the beach and so on. I see in those working class resorts of like the Wildwoods, right, how often you have multi-generations of families vacationing together. Okay, it makes me quite nostalgic. That is something that's completely gone from the upper middle class. The more affluent you are, the less likely it is that you're going to go vacation with your parents, okay, where people run off to expensive resorts in the Caribbean and so on. They're not taking, the grandparents with them, right? But working class families in Fairmount Park, in Philadelphia, every week you can see immigrant families still, African-American families. They'll come for a day in the park with the food, toys, football, etc. They'll take some park benches, the barbecue pits, and so on. Spend the whole day there. Multiple generations of a family all together for the day at the park. And every time I see that, it takes me all the way back to Endicott and to what I remember that's lost now. Okay, which is that everyone knowing each other, the people who came from the same town in Italy, and the people would grow up next to each other. People didn't move. Today we're in a very transient culture where people, to get a job, will go hundreds of miles, thousands of miles far from the extended family. So what you have today, it's great difficulty for women trying to manage a household, okay, and also a job at the same time. Simultaneous is the collapse of the old extended family into the nuclear family. Now, what I'm saying in my work is that I think the nuclear family is toxic This is something new, and this is what conservatives, my argument with conservatives, who constantly talk about, the need for a two-parent family and so on. I'm going, throughout most of human history, okay, there has never been a two-parent family. Okay, it has been a multi-generational family has raised, the children, right? Not just two. So I believe that what we have today in America so often is like these houses lined up next to each other with a two-parent family and the children. These actually are kind of toxic cubicles for neurosis. Okay, I don't necessarily think that has ever been, a healthy prescription for children to be raised. And another thing is that at first, women had benefited enormously from the invention of all these labor-saving appliances, like the automatic, washer and dryer and so on. Right? This saves women so much time compared to all the laborious doing of the laundry and rinsing out squeezing the water out and so on. They had these, but now today, the laundry, which used to be a communal activity with other women, has turned into an isolated, lonely thing, for women. Okay, you're trapped in a house to do the laundry, okay, et cetera. And also, the higher up you rise in affluence, the less likely it is that you know the neighbors. Okay, you don't know the neighbors, all right? And even if you know the neighbors, you would never dream of saying to them, oh, something's come up. Can you just watch, my 2 or 3 children, okay, while I just run to... You would never do that in a million years, okay, in an affluent neighborhood. Whereas in a working class neighborhood, people know each other, they trust each other, and also people in working class neighborhoods, particularly in cities like South Philadelphia, are oriented toward the street. They're watching, they're sitting on the stoop, they're sitting on the porch, okay? So there's this sense of a neighborhood that's it's like a real community of the old days. So again, I think that as people move up the economic scale in terms of affluence and power in the workplace, they're actually getting more and more neurotic, okay, because of the psychological dislocations that have not been, I think, fully confronted. So I don't know exactly how to recover these things, but I do think that it's useful for women to realize, okay, how much they've lost in terms of their solidarity with other women.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just like to ask you to talk some about the differences between men and women that you think are really important, whether they're hardwired or have developed over thousands of years in feeling, in thinking, in sex drive, in workplace, whatever you want to say about that.
Well, I analyze this at length in Sexual Persona. Yes, I speak about biological factors and the way the mind works. For example, I mean, it's slightly satirical in chapter 1 of Sexual Persona, but I think I'm right, which is that boys have to learn, because of their genital anatomy, how to aim. Right? If they don't learn how to aim, okay, when they try to urinate, okay, they will soil themselves and the wall and everything else, okay? They must learn to aim, okay? And eventually that carries over into the sex act, all right? And so I talk about that, the focus and purposiveness and directedness, okay? And how, Freud, it talks about how primitive man preened himself on his ability to put out a fire, okay, with a stream of urine, okay? And I say, well, that's a strange thing to be proud of, but beyond the scope of any woman, all right, who would scorch her hands in the process of trying to put out a fire with a stream of urine, all right? So I do believe, okay, that there are sexual differences. I think that, that as civilizations evolve, as they become more complicated, that gender eventually has a performance quality, that it becomes an artifact, like other artifacts, like works of art. I mean, that's why I have a 700-page book on this subject, my first book. But that ultimately there are very fundamental sexual differences that come from the fact that most men have 8 to 10 times the amount of testosterone in their bodies than women do, right? And that, for my entire life I've noticed the way men talk and think is different. I mean, heterosexual men talk and think different than the way women think. I remember my father saying when he would listen to the women talking, my mother, my aunt, and all of it. He said he could never follow the conversation. No names were being used. And sentences weren't being ended, okay? But yet everyone knew exactly what they were talking about, okay? And I've noticed that myself. People will say, oh, did he see that? He saw that? Oh, okay. He saw that she saw? Oh, okay, all right. So, all right. And that's why I love The Real Housewives, okay? It's I adore The Real Housewives. Gloria Steinem hates it, okay, you see. But The Real Housewives absolutely, okay, records and documents the way women are in a group, okay? Now, maybe not dissenting women, maybe not lesbian women, okay? I'm just talking about heterosexual women, okay? All right, in a group. I love to be around heterosexual women talking in a group, okay? And so do a lot of gay men. That's why they're stylists and so on and so forth. Okay, there's like a weird energy, okay, that the women have with each other. Okay, it goes all the way back to the hunter-gatherer era, okay, where the women were all talking with each other around the hut while the men went off in the hunting party and had to be quiet and silent while they stalked the prey. You see, the talkative men didn't last long, okay? Okay, etc. All right, but at the same time, and so I do feel that that transgender people and that many gay men occupy kind of middle ground between the sexes, right? And a tremendous amount of the history of the arts, okay, it was created in that middle ground, okay, that the transgender shamans had a vision of the universe, had an intuitive quality, but biologically speaking, every single cell of the human body, the DNA has a DNA code in it which tells you what the actual gender of that body is. So that I think that there's a lot of talk these days about the ability to change sex, but you cannot change sex, in point of fact. You can make modifications of the body. You can take hormones that further change the appearance of the body, but ultimately, at a certain point, every single cell in the human body will continue to show that it is either male or female, except for a very tiny number of truly intersex people. Now, I don't know what I exactly belong to. I never for a day in my life have I felt female. Never for a minute in my life have I felt female. But I don't feel like a man either. Okay, so I'm willing to acknowledge, that I have a gender dysphoria. Okay, and out of that gender dysphoria, I made a lot of books. Okay. My books are my sex change. I've said that Sexual Persona is the biggest sex change in history, okay? And in fact, the truest thing ever said about Sexual Persona was by this gay intellectual guy in Massachusetts who ran the Gay and Lesbian Review back in the 90s. He said, the voice of Sexual Persona is the voice of Myra Breckinridge. Now, Myra Breckinridge was the transsexual star of a Gore Vidal book that was made into a movie that should have been a great movie with Raquel Welch. It was a terrible movie, all right? But that is really true. My voice is the voice of a transsexual. This is absolutely true, okay? But nevertheless, I believe, and that's why I've called my book, okay, Free Women, Free Men, that it's time to valorize, okay, the sexes. Transgender people in the middle, okay, actually gain identity from the existence of the mass of men and the mass of women. Okay. So I applaud you as a man. Okay.
Thank you so much for being bold and going into the non-PC realm. It
Okay.
empowers people like me. I sort of grew up Baptist Taliban, if you will, and I made the jump to libertarianism. And I would just like to ask you, from my perspective, libertarianism is about empowerment. It is the party the women should be migrating to, in my opinion.
Yeah.
In your opinion, how do we draw more women to the libertarian philosophy and explain to them that it is the party of empowerment, whereas the Democrat, progressive, the idea is sort of to replace men with the government, whereas the libertarian philosophy is to empower women and while also empowering men. So
Yes.
how would we do that?
Yes, I do call myself a libertarian as well, even though I'm not really part of the Libertarian Party, at all. But yes, I think this is really true. What you said exactly right. Okay, we cannot have a situation where women now substitute the government, okay, for the male figures upon which we used to depend, okay, for economic sustenance. I think we need many more actually parties in the United States. The problem is we have these like giant big tent parties. parties, the two, okay, which suck up, all the oxygen and all the money and become a kind of porridge, okay, there's no clear thing. But, countries that have multiple parties, 12 or 13 parties, often are very fractured. They have to form coalitions in order to govern. So I can see the difficulty of multiple parties in a country of our size. But there's absolutely no doubt that we need tremendous drastic reform of the present party structure, and I think it will only come from the challenge. Okay, that's why I'm trying to develop, on the Green Party too, even though I don't necessarily agree with everything the Green Party stands for. So are you? Would you say that you, in terms of your economic policy as a libertarian, do you think you tend more toward conservative or capitalist, or what? How do you?
I find myself to be fiscally conservative. I think that free enterprise has brought more people out of poverty than any government program, and I've traveled overseas quite a bit, and I've seen that. I think that we're facing a situation where we don't have free enterprise. We have burdensome regulation and taxation that's sort of suppressing small businesses and individuals to the advantage of too big to fail corporations. We bail out the banks, we kick out the the homeowners.
Yes.
So I would say yes, I'm fiscally conservative.
Yes, I feel that what we need especially in the inner city, okay, in high school, is the teaching of entrepreneurship, okay, to disadvantaged youth, to show them the way the system can work, and everything about the kind of thing that comfortable middle class and upper middle class young people get from their parents who know about banking and stock investment and so on. I mean, I definitely believe in a much more jobs-oriented educational system, both at the high school and the college level. Okay, well, I think we are at the same mind. Okay. Perhaps
Thank
you'll
you
stay
so
in touch
much.
with me.
Keep
All right.
doing what you're
All right,
doing. Be the
great.
change.
Thank you. Great. Okay. All right. Very good. No more questions? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming.
And nobody builds walls better than me, believe me. I'm gonna bomb the shit out of them. We will make